100 brave Americans whaling for to go, singing, blow your winds in the morning and blow your winds, hi-ho. All away your running gear and blow, boys, blow. They'll send you to New Bedford, a famous whaling port, and give you to some land sharks to board and pitch you out, singing, blow your winds in the morning and blow your winds, hi-ho. All away your running gear and blow, boys, blow.
Ships have been a priceless resource that countless societies have utilized for thousands of years. With countries being separated by enormous spreads of water, boats have been the best mode of transportation for many eras. Years of innovations in boat design yielded large, wooden sailboats that supported long trips at sea in the first commercial whaling industry. During the golden age of whaling, boats like the Charles W. Morgan were constructed to be average on all accounts. The ship was built of live and yellow oak and cost slightly more than $50,000 to build and outfit. It proceeded to make a profit even on the first voyage. Many years later, the Morgan would be marked as a lucky ship because of its ability to survive through incredible odds. The Charles W. Morgan's whaling career illustrates perfectly how the New England whaling industry affected exchange, exploration, and encounters with people across the globe. Although whaling has been practiced for hundreds of years, the American whaling industry grew exponentially from 1816 to 1850.
The significance of the American whaling industry is not so much in its mechanics, which is what fascinates everybody, including me, but in the fact that it really provided the capital to continue the rapid development of the Industrial Revolution in the United States.
Many parts of the whale were collected and traded, and because of their multiple uses, they became a huge resource and the demand for them increased. The head wax, called spermaceti, was the most valuable product from the whale that was traded. The spermaceti was used primarily to make candles and cosmetics. There was also a high demand for the sperm oil, which was used for illumination, lubrication and machinery, and also for creating high-quality soap. During the peak years of the whaling industry, over 50% of the sperm oil obtained by American vessels was exported to other countries.
So here we are, new country, new economy, new kind of technology, and all this money is coming in from outside the country, not as investment, but to buy that product.
Whale oil from humpback, bowhead, and right whales was known as train oil, and although it was an inferior grade of oil compared to those of sperm whales, it was still highly demanded for the tempering of steel, screw cutting, and cordage manufacturing. Baleen was also of high value. The misconception is that baleen is a bone within the whale. However, it is actually a keratin-composed structure, much like human nails, that it hangs from the roof of the mouth of the baleen whale used to strain krill from the seawater. This bone-like substance was used worldwide for many years to produce mostly women's corsets, as well as buggy whips, fishing poles, and hoops for women's skirts. Whales played a vital role in everyday life for Americans. Many communities also used whales as a food source, mostly consuming the tail and breast, while sometimes using the oil in their cooking. The high demand for the multi-purpose whale products meant that more ships needed to be built and better access to fertile hunting grounds needed to be obtained. Despite the fact that previously the East Coast had been the focal point of whaling, the demand wouldn't have been met if the industry was contained to the Atlantic. The West Coast waters were crucial to supporting the enlarging Industrial Revolution. By stationing on the West Coast, ships effectively avoided Cape Horn and its treacherous conditions, which made for safer and more efficient voyages. With significantly shorter distances to overcome, whale ships saw shorter voyages and experienced a higher flow of products. The products collected were then transferred to the East Coast by railroad, where they were processed and sold. The West Coast had provided a sufficient amount of whales, but the industry still needed more. Whaling ships would continue to venture farther and farther away from common territory, but their common stops were not forgotten. Many ports that they encountered regularly became stops for all ships and were labeled ports of call. Places such as Hawaii and the Azores became staples in the routes of many ships because of their prime locations and resources. Ports of call were commonly places that were within a few days' travel from whaling grounds and a convenient stop that helped the whaling industry take root. For example, on January 7, 1864, the Charles W. Morgan docked in the port of call on St. Vincent Island. During the stop, the captain went ashore and exchanged goods from the ship to the natives.
The captains began to bring along other things that they learned appealed to the islanders. Nails were extremely popular. Things like beads and combs that were a novelty for people who lived in the islands. Those kinds of contacts formed a lot of the early experience of islanders.
Nelson Cole Haley wrote about his experiences and exchanges with islanders. He states,
"When the captain handed me the $1.50, he said,
'That will be enough to get the men's dinner with and give them a drink besides, as things of that kind are very cheap here.'
But here was a bill, by the looks of it, for $5 or $6.
Nelson's story depicts a version of how small economies grew between whaling ships and islands. However, ports of call weren't just used to replenish the food on the ship, as they often provided the men aboard the ships a chance to connect with people outside of the crew.
Ships were at the very tip of the spear in terms of encountering native populations on islands throughout the Pacific. Many islands had much of their early contact with people from outside the islands and the Polynesian world through whalemen.
Ports of call also provided a place for men who could not handle life as a whaler. During a voyage in 1865, the Morgan was en route to the Oquette Sea, and when it docked at Emuado of the Mariana Islands, 5 of the men deserted the ship. The island then supplied them with 5 natives who were usually well versed in the ways of boating and whaling. This was a common practice in the whaling industry and made for more diverse ship crews. It wasn't a surprise that some men couldn't handle the life as a whaler. It was a challenging task, and with the demand for products being so high, there was never a lull in the action. However, the demand became so high that whalers couldn't supply products fast enough. This caused the cost of whale products to increase, and naturally, companies and consumers alike started to look for alternatives for whale oil to maximize profitability and stretch savings. Companies had to pay $1.77 in American dollars for 1 gallon of sperm oil, which is equivalent to $47.16 in today's money. To put this into perspective, today, heating oil costs an average of around $1.35 a gallon. Petroleum became the most practical option to replace whale oil and be used as an illuminant or for fuel. American workers started turning to the jobs of the Industrial Revolution rather than joining the ranks of the whale ships. Although train oil still proved to be superior over petroleum and acting as a lubricant, it failed to keep investors interested in maintaining their stake in the industry through and into the 20th century. The use of alternate oils and replacements for baleen led to the American fleet of over 640 whale ships in 1846 to deteriorate. Most ships had bleak futures and were quickly becoming deserted for the promise of the upcoming gold rush. Although the Morgan sustained major damage from the hurricane of 1938, Carl Cutler, one of the founders of Mystic Seaport, negotiated for the deteriorated ship to be brought to Mystic. There, the ship was restored back to its previous glory. Today, the Morgan is now the only remaining whale ship of her kind. The advancing technology and loss of interest from ship crews and investors alike led the whaling industry production to decrease and eventually become removed altogether from the American economy. While the American whaling industry saw decreases in the late 1800s, Norwegian operations saw exponential growth after creating such technologies like the grenade harpoon that more effectively killed whales. The Norwegians' modern whaling techniques claimed substantially more whales than the square-rigged American vessels were ever capable of, and eventually led many whale species to the brink of extinction. The process of whaling has become frowned upon, and most consider it morally and ethically wrong. Japan, Norway, and Iceland still follow the practice of whaling. However, due to the International Whaling Commission ban of 1986, they must set limits and record and report their catches. Due to the small amount of countries still participating in the whaling industry, it is one of the most forgotten aspects of history that many Americans fail to realize played such a big role in the American economy. It is important that the Charles W. Morgan and Mystic Seaport continue to serve and educate as the world's last remaining link to a pivotal industry that effectively explored foreign waters, encountered new cultures, and exchanged different lifestyles.